see you?
I'm actually I'm just over the border from Switzerland, not far from Geneva, in France actually. So near Mont Blanc. I don't know if you know Mont Blanc.
Who doesn't know Mont Blanc?
I can just see myself on the screen, but it doesn't matter. I'm not sure I have like a perfectly formed question, but I just felt a kind of impulse to raise my hand. And
Great.
yeah, I've really appreciated the poetry for sure. I'm coming from Ireland, so John O'Donoghue and Yeats poetry. Maybe I don't know if this is a like perfectly articulated question, but I'm just thinking of that experience, you know, of how a poem kind of comes into being. So, you know, there's something like there's no form and then the poem. And I'm just thinking about making the connection between that and maybe a strange connection, but what's going on at the moment. I recently read that maybe 380 million people around the world will fall into like very serious poverty with all this COVID stuff. So I'm just thinking about, and this is a general question, but what would a more compassionate kind of global world look like? And I know that's a very general question, but I guess the reason I'm asking you as well is just because at that intersection of science and mindfulness, and I'm guessing that to make the journey from like mindfulness being something practiced in Buddhism and having a particular form to even, I guess, being this MBSR, being something more scientific, it must have been some almost like, you know, like a new form. So I'm just curious. I'm just thoughts that I was thinking as you were talking on this subject.
Well, you raised a lot of very interesting and provocative points. Not sure exactly what to say in response, except that the poets do a certain kind of interior work, especially the great poets, in the same way that the meditators are, you know, we're going beyond words. We're dropping underneath thought and apprehending whatever it is that we're apprehending. And when that gets put back into words by really, you know, people like Yeats or John O'Donoghue, it resonates so deeply in the heart of other people, especially if they hear it as opposed to just read it, but even reading it, that it's kind of transmits something that's very hard to do with prose. So it's got a certain kind of embodiment to it. Other than that, I'm not sure where to sort of, you know, sort of come into what you're asking, because it is so kind of vague in a certain way. But let me just say that, you know, what I've said many times before, that it's really trustworthy to listen to the feelings, I won't even say questions, but the intuition that there's something here that's really important in terms of what is to come, like, or what the reality is now and what the world will look like if it were more mindful. We're participating in that. And I think it's really important not to idealize it, but to see it in the most microscopic levels in which we treat each other, in which we care for each other, in which we attend to what most needs attending. And to sort of point you in a certain direction, I haven't recommended this book, but there's a book out there called Factfulness by, I don't remember his name right off the top of my head, but a Swedish epidemiologist. And then his children, I think, brought it out after he died, but where on every measure of human well-being over the past 200 years, those measures have only gotten better, including, you know, the education of girls in societies where girls used to never be educated on every level, including levels of violence and so forth. So the book is called Factfulness, and I have it behind me. And also, um, uh, there's a book called um, Enlightenment Now by Steven Pinker, who was originally a linguist and philosopher and professor at Harvard. And he's also making the case that if you look at the data, and he has, about violence, about warfare, about disease, about everything else, that all of the indicators are that we're moving in a direction of greater well-being. But, you know, one nuclear accident or one pandemic that we don't treat appropriately, that's 10 times what COVID is, and all of those data points for the past 200 years would be wiped out. So we're at a really fecund moment on the planet, and we need each other, and we need to help each other to envisage what it would be like to actually be real with each other, not by falling into utopian views, but actually by grounding it in real life, measurable public health in the deepest of ways, um, uh, public health indicators. And just to say, MBSR, when I started it in 1979, was meant to be a public health intervention. It was not meant to be a therapy for people at all, medical or psychological or otherwise. It was meant to move the bell curve of the entire world, making medicine a kind of test case where if we could take thousands of people who are falling through the cracks of the healthcare system and invite them to do something for themselves that no one else on the planet could do for them through these practices of cultivating mindfulness in various ways, then that itself would transform medicine, transform healthcare, transform our capacity for living life as if it really mattered, and thus transform the world.
Okay,
So
yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Narayan.